be honest, I'm a little bit biased. Kind of grew up in the Philadelphia market, so I have a genuine passion for Philadelphia golf, but I've been fortunate enough to see enough in that area clubs to know the depth and quality of the area is really unsurpassed. But, you know, it's interesting. So I've played golf since I was the age of 6. My first job was actually as an outside service golf shop attendant, so backroom staff. And the head pro said, "I don't think this is for you. Why don't you go down to the grounds department?" And so I started working on a golf course when I was 15 years old, mowing greens, raking bunkers, string trimming, and was very fortunate early on in my career to have good mentorship. At Marion Golf Club really is where it started. I worked for a gentleman by the name of Matt Schaefer, and really kind of moved through what I call what is well known as the Latchaw Network, and worked for some really prominent superintendents. And very fortunate in my career, 40 of my coworkers are now golf course superintendents all across the country. Over half of them oversee top 100 facilities. And so I've just been very fortunate, I guess, in my career to be a part of a championship elite culture and understand the different personalities and club dynamics that go into staff development. And so again, my career has really been, I guess you could say, a blessing and very involved in golf. I have a 3-year-old daughter who just picked up the game, a 1-year-old daughter who's a wrecking ball but just loves to go out, walk the golf course. And so I have a deep passion for the game. And I think everybody in this room obviously is here because they love golf and they want to see the game grow. And we're going to talk about some things here today that hopefully you can take away some tidbits that help you at your clubs. Some things are very grassroots initiatives, but in my experience have been fortunate to see results not only as a practitioner, as a superintendent, but now starting to see clubs of all different backgrounds, whether it's public, municipality, top 100, resorts, all implement these same strategies that have been able to help them. Really what I find is create awareness in the industry and out of the industry about careers in golf. So, as the introduction said, I worked with around 50 clubs in my first year of business, all on recruiting, attracting, staff development, and also golf course superintendent searches. And here's some of the key themes that I hear in my travels. The cupboard's bare. There's no pipeline, there's no bench to build mid-level management. And that's a serious issue in 5 to 10 years, is where are we pulling our next leaders, our next general managers, our next superintendents. A lot of it has to be built at the grassroots level, getting our education systems. I was just at Penn State literally last week, where they have 50% capacity for their turf program. The #1 school in the country is at 50% capacity. Most turf programs are shutting down, and there's a serious concern more are going to continue to shut down. So where are we getting educated type people to fill special roles? Obviously rising entry wages, and I'm going to show you some data here coming up of how that's impacting clubs and also what you should be planning for moving forward. Biggest thing that I find right now as I work with clubs is just the fact that their senior level management is burnt out, they're frustrated. They post a job and they're not getting any people walking through the door. Some people that interview don't show up for the first day. It's beyond frustrating. And so what are some solutions for that? But this is one thing I saw this year when I started doing some basic entry-level searches for clubs, is really this wage increase over the course of the year to really combat outside of the market. And it's a 17% increase in entry wages in the hospitality and trade sectors. I don't see that trend changing, going into 2022. So as you're preparing for budgets, you really have to consider those entrance wages, whether it's for servers, bussers, outside staff, groundskeepers. That's really just what the market's dictating. You drive anywhere and you see Burger King, $17 an hour. And maybe in some areas of Metro New York, this entrance wage is even higher. but I think it's really important that people communicate that as they start to plan moving forward. I did a little study on my own of just all the different requisitions and that I work with, and just to try to get a basis of, all right, is there a number that attracts people with no experience more than other wages? And obviously here you can see if you're in that range between $11 to $14, we were seeing maybe an applicant every 10 days. So you start thinking about, as the season grows and the lack of people, they just don't have the supply. All the way up to $20 an hour as an entrance wage, where we were seeing an applicant pretty much per day. So obviously wages and compensation do have an impact in general of just getting people to show up with no experience. Consistently across the board of what I see, just an observation, and again, this isn't just focused on golf, superintendents and grounds. It's really what I see working in the culinary section, golf shop operations. That entry wage in most states, from Boston down to DC, is immediately going to be a minimum of $15. And most likely, at many clubs, it's going to be north of $20 for entry wages. First line supervisors, they would typically be assistant, maybe a spray technician, could be a front of house manager, kind of that next tier. That $45,000 to $60,000 mark seems like what I find is an attractable salary for somebody with multiple years of experience, maybe a little bit of education as well, and then all the way up to assistant managers. So again, these are just my benchmarks. I'm sure there's other entities that have other data, but this is just from what I've seen in our requisitions and working with clubs all across the East Coast. I put this question out, so you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram. I'm pretty active on social media. But I asked a question a few months ago, mid-season, and I had about 100 replies of how many clubs are dealing without an assistant manager, an equipment technician. It's pretty scary. And so when you think about the pressures that the department heads are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, take this home with you so you can educate your members. This isn't an individual club issue. It's across the country, across the world. The same issues we're seeing here in the States in the club industry are the same in Europe, as far as Australia. So now this is kind of where my story picks up. All the things we just talked about, I dealt with as a golf course superintendent. So the club that I was a superintendent at is your middle-of-the-road private facility in what I would call a middle-of-the-road, economically deprived region of Baltimore. Bethlehem Steel used to basically dominate the area, and then when they went out of business, essentially everything went with it. And so Sparrows Point was previously owned by Bethlehem Steel and really fell on hard times, especially during the recession in 2008. So when I started as a superintendent, our average salary or average wage for a core staff member was $10.50 an hour. For the average staff member, minimum wage in Baltimore was $8, so it was by default what the entrance wage. And so, coming from those clubs like Oakmont and Marion, Southern Hills, where, not to say that they're overspending, but they're not having a hard time filling staff because they're paying competitive wages. And so I saw this trend 6-7 years ago of what was going to happen to the rest of the industry, because it was going to basically keep going up the chain. And after essentially a year of banging my head against the wall and not being able to give proper increases, I had a guidance counselor from Baltimore County Public Schools come to my office and talk to me about a youth work-study program. Fast forward 6 years later, we became the first golf course in the state of Maryland to offer a youth apprenticeship program, a truly formalized, Department of Labor recognized program for staff development. And so with that model, I was able to create pay-for-performance metrics versus just saying, well, the club down the street or the business down the street's paying $13, we have to meet that. So I really created a system internally of how to scale people, develop them, and keep it a sustainable way to actually build towards market industry numbers. And oftentimes in the golf course superintendent world, people kind of look at me as the guy that worked with high school students. So over those 6 years, we had 50 students come through this program, and now 15 of them are in the turf industry all across the East Coast. But really what happened for me was I got connected to different representatives, chambers of commerce, occupational rehab services, veterans, Department of Labor representatives, and I really understood there's a whole craft behind workforce development. It's just something that really didn't exist in the club industry, to the level of what is workforce development. So to me, it's really management development. It's looking at the skills, the communities that may not be represented in your workforce. It's trying to align industry standards, not just pay, but training, education, and utilizing existing resources within your specific community, how to build your workforce. So I got engaged with people represented IT companies, manufacturing, health, and I was pretty blown away at what they were doing using this same exact system with high school students and really trying to engage these different agencies and how they built their workforce. So in the function of essentially 2 to 3 years, we went from a 50% turnover rate to 87% retention using this kind of system. In our first year of implementing this with clubs, specifically as we talk about workforce development, we have 15 individuals who are in a formalized apprenticeship program. At 3 of the clubs, they lost assistant managers this year, and we're able to backfill them with some of these individuals who got formalized training and a little bit of continued education. I know this slide's a little bit hard to see, but essentially you have to look at yourself as it's an employer-driven model, and you're really trying to utilize all the resources you have. As I said, it could be a K through 12 institution, community college, veterans, people with disabilities, occupational rehab services, and really trying to come together and work together to build your workforce. So in New York, here's just some examples of the different agencies that I've started to work with as part of a partnership with the New York State Turfgrass Association. And conceptually, our idea is to create a statewide apprenticeship program for turf managers, whether that be in sports turf, golf turf, or equipment managers, and utilizing some of these resources and their connections with people to engage them into the game of golf. So one of the things that I learned kind of through this year, working with different clubs, is that most people don't even know this exists. They don't even know that there's opportunities in accounting, in culinary, in turf. Most people don't even know that turf's even a career pathway. And so I think creating awareness is really what a lot of these different institutions or agencies are helping us do, is creating awareness about the game of golf. And here's just a list of all the different, I call it my playbook, of different resources that I connect to and with on behalf of clubs, and in this situation as part of an association model. A lot of people will ask me what's the one that generates the most, and it's so regionalized. Every place that I work with kind of has their own little communities and different resources that are better to tap into. So it's hard to really say which one at this point is more effective, but again, just different leads for you to consider. And most people don't know, again, as kind of I've learned, that there's resources like local workforce development boards or career one-stops that really will help educate job seekers. Doesn't necessarily mean they're unemployed, but just people that are looking for different career pathways, and they'll do that for you at no charge. We have found that pretty successful in our general outreach and where we're actually pulling people from. And again, it might seem very grassroots, but I think no matter what level of club you're at, this is a way that you can help build your team internally. And it is a changing workforce. I can tell you when I was coming up through the ranks, at Oakmont Country Club, we had 15 people on staff with a degree in turf management. And that's just pretty much non-existent really anymore. And so you're gonna have to train people differently than what you were 5-10 years ago. I find that educating your department heads consistently, because I know it's frustrating. You're dealing with people that have no inclination of what a country club is, or the sophistication level of members. You're gonna have to train them on those soft skills over and over again. And it's beyond frustrating that you have to keep doing that. But it's really important that your department heads are educated on this all the time. So management development training, self-awareness training are gonna be key components, in my opinion, of moving forward for, department education. And there's great things that are going on in the industry as a whole, whether it's with the Club Managers Association, the PGA of America, the GCSAA, all these outreach programs that I kind of have listed up here. While you might not think that it's really important, it's going to make a change, the reason you have to is because your competitors are. And I'm not talking about clubs, I'm talking about other industries. So many times I go to job fairs on behalf of clubs, whether it's at high school, local community job fairs, and you see top level organizations, Aerotech, PNC, law firms, Google, Apple. You see them at these things. So if those industries are doing it, then there's no reason why the golf industry is not participating. So outreach in general has to become more of a fabric for your clubs individually and association-wide. So one of the programs that I help clubs really start is Formalize Apprenticeships. And most people think of apprenticeship in construction, electrician, but that's not really what I would say the Department of Labor is pushing these days. Apprenticeships are really customized to what you need in your workforce. And that could be from a basic server busser all the way up to a management level. And so I work with these different organizations currently to really try to help them build industry credentials through formalized training. As I said in New York, I'm working with the New York State Turf Association to really bring some of these entities. The SUNY Delhi Turf Management Program is being offered to staff members as a form of education that those employees can take at no charge to them. Yes, the clubs are going to be paying a little bit up front, but the benefit for them is they're going to have opportunity for reimbursement through a variety of grants. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But it's also bringing some of these other entities, New York State Ag, career and tech schools, John Deere, Toro, some of our major distributors to educate these people on the career pathways. And the GCSAA, our national association. So again, apprenticeship is an on-the-job training program. Formalized in our situation, it's a 4,000-hour program. So essentially 2 years. And it's not an internship where you might have a student for 3 to 6 months. This can be offered to a new recruit, an existing employee, and it's a way for them to develop within the organization that you're setting those benchmarks. Typically every 6 months, they'll be offered an opportunity for some level of a pay increase, and that's all dictated by the clubs themselves. They're gonna get some level of education. In our situation, they're gonna get college level credit, but some apprenticeships might use a local training seminar, an event like this as part of that continued education. It's really customizable. But the biggest thing that I've seen is the mentorship within the departments and the assistant managers that need that sort of support and that education on how to build leadership skills. Here's some of the other benefits of having a formalized on-the-job training program. What I've found, again, having done this now, not just for my own club, but now doing it with other clubs, is the sheer fact that the total applicants that come into these type jobs are a little bit highly skilled, more highly skilled. They have professional experience, just they didn't know that this was a career opportunity. And I'll give an example of one gentleman, Waynesboro Country Club in Philadelphia. Tom Fazio design. I think the club was built in the 1960s. They started their program this year, and they recruited a gentleman from Tampa, Florida, who worked in the outside operations, and thought that for him to eventually become a good GM or somebody that was successful in the club industry, having some sort of formal background on the golf course maintenance would benefit him. So they actually recruited a gentleman from a completely different state, all because of those networks that were created as part of that formalized program with apprenticeship. Congressional Country Club in Bethesda, Maryland, just signed on their first apprentice. The gentleman is Hispanic, English is a second language. So when we start talking about diversity and those opportunities in the golf industry, this is why I personally not only am passionate about it, but believe these formalized on-the-job training programs are going to be critical to bring different people, whether it's women, different ethnicities, underserved communities, into the game of golf. Some of the frequently asked questions that I get is, who's apprenticeship for? It's really for anybody, in my opinion, but you have to have clubs that have this sort of mentorship. It's got to be in their DNA. If you're just looking at this as a quick fix to get bodies in, it's not the program for you. And I know Keith's going to talk about seasonal work here coming up, which I know fits a unique niche for most. But it really is for any club that can utilize this as a training program. As I said, it's not a quick fix. And what does it cost you? Typical apprenticeship programs really range anywhere from $2,500 up to $15,000, depending on what your end goals are. But when we talk about, to me, it's about not about necessarily the money. It's more about getting the right people on the bus in the right seat and getting different types of people. So here's a picture of all the different types of individuals in the first year that have come into this sort of formalized program. And as you can see, different color, women, different ages. We've had mature adults above the age of 30, all the way down to people who are 18 years old coming out of high school. When you think about cost, because it's oftentimes a question I get from clubs is, all right, what's the guarantee I'm going to get people? Well, I can tell you, at least in the first year, in the clubs that I've worked with, we've had applicants within the first 7 days. We've had hires within the first 14 to 21 days. So to me, it's a really effective way, and there's other metrics that you can use from other industries, but recently, I was just awarded as a group sponsor for 19 clubs, $500,000 to offset the education and training costs, including wages for apprentices. So the business benefit for you is pretty substantial. I just applied for another grant in the state of Pennsylvania to expand registered apprenticeship across the state for $250,000 in grants. And again, that might not seem like a whole lot for some of the, it's called up the food chain clubs, but it's really important to see that investment as being rewarded because in my opinion, the Department of Labor sees this as a genuine solution. In Maryland, I just talked about this gentleman who enrolled in apprenticeship. For his first 13 weeks as an apprentice, 80% of his wages will be reimbursed to the club as being part of a formalized training program. So just to give you some metrics of the potential for this, and I often see most clubs are only bringing in 1 or 2 apprentices per year, but as you think about succession planning, after a year, 2 years, what started small now becomes routine, and you have the bench is rebuilt. For Sparrows Point when I was there, we only had 1 or 2 people to start. But over the course of 5-6 years, I was able to really focus on those 2-3 people each year. Over the course of 3 years, I built a staff of 10 to 12 core people. So kind of my closing thoughts. I see in the clubs that I work with, department heads are getting stretched everywhere. They're so focused on what's in front of them that they don't have the time to focus on recruiting and outreach. And so if you don't have a talent acquisition team, don't have somebody that's doing full-time recruitment, I think it needs to be part of your strategy moving forward. Because it's not going to get easier, especially in an industry that's so underserved and not enough people are aware of career opportunities in golf. I mean, again, look at my career. I'm 34 years old. I took a leap of faith in the middle of the pandemic, knowing more so the opportunity to create opportunities for other people, but because game of golf's been great to me in my life. But I really think that clubs are going to have to rethink having somebody that's specifically designated to outreach, sourcing, interviewing. Probably the biggest frustration in my business is to go through pre-vetting and bring people to the table and then not see the hiring managers follow through on a hiring process because an irrigation blowout on 16, there was a member event and they totally lost track of having an interview. That's how your department heads need support, is to really prioritize this. Invest in employee support systems, because the ROI is going to pay off for you over and over by having more passionate people, by having people who care, and you're really changing your workforce because those people that are now coming in are going to refer their friends, which really is the number one way to recruit, is through internal referrals. And the last thing that I would tell you is that I had, kind of going through my process, I had an African-American counselor come to me, and I asked her, I said, why are clubs, and why is this club specifically struggling with getting people in? And she said, it's the gate at your door. What it represents to the common person is that they don't belong. And that stood with me early on in my career path of what I needed to do to change as a leader, and help change our club's mentality to be more flexible, more accommodating. And again, over the course of 6 years, we were fortunate to bring in women, Hispanic, African Americans, and we created a culture where people wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to bring people in that they trusted. So make sure you're consistently educating your members about the challenges these clubs are dealing with, because it's not going away. If you'd like to learn more about apprenticeship, and if that can be a solution for you and your facility, on November 19th, I'm hosting a virtual event where I'm bringing people from the Department of Labor, people who represent apprenticeships, veterans, high schools, career tech programs, into a central event just to educate people on the benefits of apprenticeship as a whole. And everything will be virtual. With that said, like I said earlier, I really appreciate everybody's time here. It's such an honor for me to be up here representing, golf course superintendents first with the club industry, and then tell a little bit about my story. And here's some of the ways you can get in touch with me.
Quick question about the federal funding for an apprenticeship program. Does the program have to be approved? Does it have to be submitted first in order to get the federal funding?
Yes, it does. Yeah, there definitely is an application process. Typically, I find from the start of engagement with the club until it's approved, somewhere between 60 to 90 days. Periodically, it might extend out further. The benefit of having a group sponsorship like we're doing in New York is that all that legwork's already done. So a club basically has one or two pieces of paper that they have to, sign off on that they want to participate. The New York State Turf Association will administer all documentation. They will help out and assist with the recruiting. Where the clubs come involved is in one-to-one mentorship and job training. That's the difference, in my opinion, between working with an individual club versus a group sponsorship, is a lot of the legwork's done for you. And then the association will submit grant processes or grant applications to the state. And again, having done this in Pennsylvania, I can tell you that the Department of Labor, when they see the reach and scalability of these programs, because clubs are statewide, it's multi-county reach. I mean, their eyes get so big because they don't have they don't have other apprenticeships that have that type of impact that golf can have.
Do you find that after you have somebody go through this apprenticeship that they are poached by other country clubs or areas?
No. I think yes and no. No, because those employees see the investment you've put into them. I can speak upon Waynesboro. They've got 2 individuals who are in this that have been there for 2-3 years, and I consistently hear from them their, I guess, appreciation for the club for doing this for them because nobody else is offering it to them. Now, I work with Allentown Municipality Golf Course. Okay, they're at the bottom of the food chain. The reality is, the Marions of the world are going to take those individuals because it's a feeder system, right? So I think that it's being self-aware of where you sit in the, I guess in the food chain of clubs. But again, it's going to benefit other people because that's a success story, which is what I sold to all these, whether it's a guidance counselor or whatever, is that when your employees or your people come here, I'm going to develop him and or her, and here's the opportunities that they have by being involved in this program. Again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.